Welcome back. Our next distinguished presenter is Richard Dolan. I'm sure his reputation precedes him. His presentation today will be focused on our place or theirs, basic questions about UFOs. Richard has quite an impressive background. His deep passion for the discipline of history resulted in a scholarship to study at Oxford University and a near miss for a Rhodes Scholarship. He studied history, English, philosophy as an undergraduate at Oxford University. He chose, instead of pursuing that area, to do graduate work at the University of Rochester, where he focused on German and Soviet studies before moving on to American Cold War diplomacy. Not wanting to teach, he left academia to write, so he's become quite a distinguished writer and researcher. In 1994, he became interested in the UFO phenomenon, and he approached it from the angle of history and politics. He was intrigued by the cultural schizophrenia, the fact that mainstream and the academic culture and the official culture continued to treat UFOs as an amusement, as the giggle factor, but that so many intelligent people privately had also taken it seriously. Throughout the 90s, he conducted a systematic bibliographic research and project, hunting down many out-of-print books and UFO documents that had been released over the years through the Freedom of Information Act. He found the amount of information nearly overwhelming, and he became so intrigued that he worked on a detailed chronology of relevant events, and he prepared that in advance of writing his critically acclaimed book, UFOs and the National Security State, Chronology of a Cover-Up, 1947 to 1973. This book provides the crucial foundation everyone needs to get a grasp and to get an understanding, a clear, comprehensive, but concise historical narrative of what he calls the problem. He's now at work on the study's second volume, which will take the story through the remainder of the 20th century. And he and his lovely wife, Karen, are manning his table outside. He has numerous books, articles, and products, I guess CDs or whatever, DVDs perhaps, that you might also find available at keyholepublishing.com. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our next distinguished guest, and with much pleasure, Richard Dolan, Our Place or Theirs, Basic Questions About UFOs.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Just for the camera.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll fix that there. Whoops. There we go. This is actually called Ours or Theirs, the basic question about UFOs. By the way, I'm still very fond of the phrase cultural schizophrenia. I coined that, I'm proud to say, and I think we should all use it because I think that's what we've got. I was just chatting with a very nice man here who's got that great, awesome computer. He knows who he is. And we talked about this society as the Matrix. He says, isn't it true that we're in the Matrix? And I said, yep, I feel that way. And, oh, we've lost the signal here. Let's do this. Hold on there. Okay. You know in the Matrix where you get that great scene where Morpheus meets Neo for the first time, and he says, you got the red pill and the blue pill. You take the blue pill, you tell yourself whatever you want to believe, and you go home. And you take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. When I very innocently started studying this topic about 10 years ago, I didn't realize that I took that red pill. I had the simplest question. I thought, well, gosh, I just want to know, was the military interested in this? And did they, have generals and admirals and such who took this seriously? And, well, that was an easy answer. That came very quickly. Yeah, big time. And then, you just get led down the rabbit hole. And after 10 years now of really thinking a lot about this, one's conception of reality just gets turned upside down. And you really have to look at this society as a kind of matrix. I mean, quite accurately so. So anyway, the other thing I would just say, this is supposed to be kind of a Q&A session, and I'm very happy to do it that way. I will say that I did more or less present a kind of presentation here for you. I have not done a dry run of this. I have no idea how this is going to come across. So I would encourage any and all questions. And with the proviso that I really wonder, like, how do I look at myself in this field? There are so many researchers who know much more than I do. I make no bones about this, who've delved into this field more deeply than I've gone. I think if I have a gift at anything, it's to communicate in a way that I think some people like to read the book, and hopefully explaining things clearly. But there are many gaps in my knowledge still, and I feel at times like an elementary level student to this day in this field. I continue to learn a lot. And that includes certain issues concerning this topic here, ours or theirs. I will say when I started this, I don't think that this is 10 years ago, gave a sufficient credence or understanding of some of the really advanced technology that humans were developing already even by World War II. And in fact, Richard Sauter this morning gave a very excellent description of some of that when he discussed Project Paperclip. I think after writing my book, I continue to think about this. And for example, the whole German contribution, I think if I were to redo anything about the book, that would be something I would treat a little differently. But today, my feeling, when you see a UFO, let's call it, Steve Bassett hates the phrase UFO, but I'm going to use it. You see a UFO out there, and it looks like that triangle. And it stops, and it hovers, and it's silent. You can ask yourself, is that ours or theirs? That's a fair question to ask. And my answer is that I genuinely think that there are both in this society and in our civilization. I'm going to try to explain why I think that is the case. There are people who look at this and they say, well, the true UFOs are alien. And I think some of the true UFOs are alien. But is it fair to say that there can be true UFOs of human origin? And I think the answer to that question today is yes. And what I mean by that is, I think we need to start realizing that there is technology that is here, very likely, as I will argue, like many others, that have been helped along by crash retrievals and hand-me-downs and such. And we've got some of these, and I think we need to call them. They're just as anomalous as anything else. They're totally outside the little reality box that our civilization tries to impose on us. When I speak of non-human origin, by the way, I mean, we could be talking about alien from another planet, but it doesn't have to be that, and I don't hold a strong opinion as to what I think the answer to that is. I mean, non-human could be time travelers, humans from the future. Stuff that, 7, 8 years ago I would have not considered as much. I'll listen now. I think there's a lot of things, problems with dimensionality and so forth. The first part of this, I want to describe what I'll call the case for them, the case that, that it's not realistic to explain all UFOs as human technology. I mean, to most of you who are here, this is a no-brainer. But we have to remember, first of all, that when we discuss this topic, not everyone is on our page. There is a mainstream society out there. There are probably some of you here today who may not have much of a background in this topic. There may be people who, God forbid, watch this video in the future and think, and they don't know much about this either. So I always try to keep in mind that there's a broader audience. And there are many people, of course, in the media who will argue that a UFO is, an advanced military, deep black type of program. I'm going to argue that that's not entirely true. First of all, very, very briefly, I just love these images of the Vagina. A thing I didn't really discuss in my book, but clearly this is a topic of ancient origins, and you go through the ancient histories of any of these societies that I've indicated here, and many others. And, you can't really call what they have UFO reports, but they've got some very suggestive, intriguing stories that, to me at least, are suggestive of something anomalous. I mean, these images here, many of you will recognize, and these are Australian Aborigine rock paintings, thousands of years old, known as Wagina. They are gods of the sky and sea. And you know what an Aborigine looks like? What is this? These are the gods from above. I'm sorry, did someone? Feel free to interrupt any time, please. There's a fascinating case, and of course I didn't bring the full paper with me. It's on my desk outside. I don't need it. A case that was described by Jacques Vallée that took place in southern Russia in 1663 in the town of Robozero. And this is a fascinating event because what happened, the thing happened, and then a local priest wrote about it, writing to his senior bishop, asking for spiritual advice on how to interpret this event. And what it was is, in this town, this is 40 years before any newspaper appeared in Russia at all. A fireball essentially comes over the town in August of 1663, estimated at about 140 or so feet in diameter. Seems to maneuver over the church. It has two extended rays that extend about 100 or more feet as well. And then it leaves. And then it comes back. And the priest who wrote about this said it darted from one direction to another, and then left again, and then returned to the terror of all those who watched it. And it remained at that time for 90 minutes. The priest described fishermen who were in their boat on the lake were deeply burned by the heat, and that the fish all swam away toward the shore. And one thing that's interesting about this is, I think as I recall correctly, this report just sat in a monastery for more than a century before someone found it. There's no indication that I'm aware of an answer. But here's a small village priest whose parishioners encountered this utterly astonishing event. This doesn't prove that that's an alien event, but it's an interesting event that I think certainly anyone today would call that a genuine UFO. Now, you look at World War II in a couple of different ways. One way to look at it is when you look at the Foo Fighter reports. I have some problems with the explanation that all Foo Fighters were German technology. Later in this, I'm going to tell you why I don't have a problem with it, but here's why I do have a problem with it. When we argue that this is German technology, you know, Foo Fighters were seen in the European theater, and they were also seen very much in the Pacific theater. So you could argue, I guess, that the Germans are hanging out over the Pacific, but I don't see that as a logical thing to do. Maybe they would. Maybe someone can explain why that would be a logical thing for them. And also, there were Foo Fighter events that took place in the immediate aftermath of the war. Leonard Stringfield, UFO researcher, had one in August of 1945, or I think September of 1945, after Hiroshima, in which his plane nearly had to ditch. They had a ball of a bright fireball that followed the plane and disabled the engines temporarily. So I don't know. I mean, I just find that, and this image of this Foo Fighter photograph, like many of the Foo Fighter reports, seem to be a kind of odd light phenomena. If someone can explain to me how this is related to the designs of the Horton brothers or Victor Schauberger or some kind of anti-grav technology, I'd like to know. And I don't say that to demean the topic, but it just seems to me that the phenomenon is a little bit bigger than German technology in World War II. The other thing to keep in mind that I try to remind myself is that I think it would be logical from my point of view that UFO sightings could pick up during World War II. I mean, first of all, you have the first time, really, in modern human history, of having extended means for detecting anomalous phenomenon. Radar, major aircraft, in the sky. I mean, 100 years prior, how were you likely to see some anomalous event? You'd be much less likely because you'd be on the ground. You wouldn't have the means to do a lot of travel, and I just don't think that you would have encountered this as much as military personnel during World War II would. with the means to do it. And I think that might be one explanation, frankly, why UFO sightings picked up. By the way, almost dropped something here. This photograph here, this is a fairly well-known photograph taken from what's called the Battle of Los Angeles. It doesn't show up, the resolution's not as good here. This is actually a very high-res image. And if you look at that, and Bruce Maccabee's here. I don't know what you think about this, Dr. Maccabee, but the thing sure looks like a ship to me.
Is that the only picture that exists? Because if the military is sitting at that, surely there should be more than one picture.
Good question. Is this the only one that exists? It's the only one that I'm aware of. Is anyone aware of another photograph of this? This is from February of 1942. And what happened was the city of Los Angeles was subject to an air raid and signals in the middle of the night. And what happened was about over 1,400 artillery shells were fired at this thing. And killed 3 LA residents directly, and 3 others died of heart attacks that were attributed to this. This was sent to me by a man. I'm actually friends with this man. He's a retired professor at Occidental College in California, a great guy, who was a boy and watched this happen as it did. And Dr. Maccabee.
I would just say that we have mentioned it a couple of times on national radio, most recently on Coast to Coast last weekend. And so far as this is the only photo that has turned up. We think there would be some more somewhere. We would also like to know where that was taken from.
My friend, whose name is Scott Littleton, I'm sure he'd not mind his name being known. I believe he actually, along with another person who's from LA, mapped out this area. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that they have the current place.
He thought he had a place, and then he had second thoughts about it. I don't know
Oh, okay.
what the resolution of that is, but it'd be nice to know if we could figure out where the camera was and where those spotlights were. We could get a better idea of how big that object is.
Great points.
In any case, it's on the order of hundreds of feet.
That object, hundreds of feet in diameter, you think? Yeah.
It also appears that the shells are all missing, like it's making the shells explode before it gets to the outside.
I wouldn't know how to answer that technically. It appears that the shells were exploding around it as if I'm getting you right, that the object was making the shells explode around it.
Who took this picture? What are those dots above the searchlight?
Those are the shells, I guess, right? These are the shells? Who took this photograph? I don't know the name of the photographer. The name escapes me. It's known. Calvert?
He was working for one of the newspapers. It was published in the newspaper.
The name is known. I'm sure. I know it's searchable.
Is there an account that said after the shooting the vehicle took off at a fast pace? Any eyewitnesses?
No, I'm not aware. I mean, the one official document, of course, was from General George Marshall, which did not describe how the object departed. Now, there are majestic... there are documents in the, research of the Cooper, Dr. Bob Wood and Ryan Wood, and I know that they have documents that indicate that other things about this. But
Richard, the shot is clearly the photographer's in the air. I mean, it's probably. I just flew in a helicopter all over the.
Couldn't he be at a high, like on a hill? You think?
No, there's no other hills. You have the San Fernando Valley behind you. You've got the Hollywood Hills and Beverly Hills, and then it just gets flat after that. So the vantage point is up high. So it's obviously a military photo from someone who's in the air.
Well, that's an excellent point. It's hard for me to make a comment on it, but I'll take it.
Helicopter all over LA doing aerial photography, so I've got it in my mind. It's very clear.
You're saying they released it? It was something the military released to the
Well,
newspaper?
it's obviously a pilot, a vantage point, because you can't get up that high. There are no towers down in the valley. That you're looking at the top of Mulholland Drive, the top of the mountain in Los Angeles. You couldn't get a shot up that high unless it was a steep angle looking way up.
So there might be a lot of eyewitnesses because each of those spotlights had to have people manning the spotlight.
Well, there were many eyewitnesses. I mean, that we all know. A lot of people were woken up by this in the middle of the night. We can keep moving on here. One last thing I'd just say is that the conclusions of these World War II anomalies are they're unknown, or at least they're not acknowledged publicly. And there were quite a few investigations done that we know about. And then you've got, I think, probable early crash recoveries. You got the ghost rocket phenomenon. This is the one known ghost rocket picture. Doesn't have to be, I don't know what this is. This could just be a meteor for all I know, but it's a ghost rocket picture. But what happened after the war, there was a series of very interesting sightings across Europe, starting in Scandinavia and spreading throughout Europe, going over France and Greece, of objects. No one knew what to call them. They said, well, they're rockets of some sort, ghost rockets, because they don't act like normal rockets. The big question is who do they belong to? A lot of Americans speculated this was a Soviet ploy to intimidate the Western countries. It is worth pointing out that in Greece, the scientist Paul Santorini, who is a world-renowned scientist involved in the atomic bomb project, was there on the spot and said, years later, I was charged by the Greek government to look into this. I had a team of engineers and scientists to do so. And we determined that these were not Russian, nor were they missiles. And then he said, before we could do anything more, the Army, after conferring with foreign officials, ordered the investigation stopped. Foreign officials, obviously, it's American. And during the ghost rocket wave, there were a number of cases where objects absolutely were known to have landed or crashed. And I think were recovered. I don't know what they said, what they were. We don't have, again, official conclusions on this. You've got then the whole wave, the interest of 1947. I don't usually talk much about the Maury Island incident. A lot of people attribute that as a hoax. I don't know. I really don't know. I think the easy answers of hoax are too easy at times. And what happened, though, was that something fell out of the sky, debris, and was recovered, and there's certainly elements of Project Paperclip involved in this. The Army Air Force guys who recovered this debris and took it back crashed, died on the way back to the base. Kenneth Arnold was absolutely subject, I think, to surveillance during the entire... He was investigating this incident. Arnold was famous after having seen the flying saucers initially, and was asked by magazine publisher Ray Palmer to look into this other incident. And so he did, and seems to have been tailed. Roswell, I don't really have a lot that I want to say about Roswell. Everyone's talked about Roswell. Let's just skip it. Really, what can I say that's going to be unique on this? I'm of the opinion that Roswell was an anomalous non-balloon event. I do not believe that it was a mogul balloon apparatus. I do not believe that we've been given the truth on this officially to this day. You can make a variation of the alien crash theme and say it was a derivation of Project Paperclip, and maybe some advanced airframe went down that they don't want you to know about. But I'm inclined to think that it was non-human, because I think that there is strong evidence that there is a non-human element, and I will get to that in a moment. One thing, this is a little-known document that I think is personally significant. From October 1947, Colonel W.D. Wentworth, who writes, "For your information, the Air Material Command at Wright Field is making a study of this subject, flying saucers, and is constructing models to be tested in a wind tunnel. As a guide in constructing the models, description from various persons who claim to have sighted these objects were used." Okay, so they're basing these models on reports that they're getting. At least this is what the document here is telling us in this instance. Air Material Command is of the opinion that some sort of object, such as the flying saucer, did exist. I think he's saying did because the main wave of sightings by October was somewhat past, and maybe he's thinking that this is all over. One problem I have with UFOs as black world technology, and again, please feel free to interject here, is that you've just got one after another really awesome airspace violation. I mean, in very sensitive places. And this goes throughout the 40s, throughout the 50s, throughout the 60s, and beyond. Very provocative encounters. I don't see this as, unless you want to postulate that a human group became an entirely rogue group, utterly independent from control of, let's say, U.S. military. Okay, maybe we can talk about that as a possibility. But like this report here, this is just one, it's typical, dealing with an airspace violation over at the Hanford Atomic Energy Commission site. This is a big deal. Objects round in form have been sighted over the plant. Air Force jets attempted interception with negative results. All units, including anti-aircraft battalion, radar units, Air Force fighter squadrons, FBI have been alerted. So what is up with that? You get this going on through the 1950s. Very provocative encounters. This is up from regarding Oak Ridge in Tennessee in 1953. And this, to me, is just one of the most amazing reports that I've ever read through the Freedom of Information Act. Object extremely black in color, did not leave a vapor trail, no sound. The object flew east at a tremendous speed for what appeared to be 3 miles, where it stopped. The object was then joined by 2 more of these same objects. A formation similar to a spread V was formed, and the objects, at a tremendous speed, flew in an eastward direction. Are we talking about human or alien? Certainly, what we're talking about is something that wasn't supposed to exist, and it was existing. That, to me, that's step one. Yes, Dr. Maccabee?
I might mention with respect to this alien in January 1949, the FBI was told by the Air Force officer in charge of the Nuclear Energy Propulsion of Aircraft, NEPA project, that the sightings of flying saucers has given an impetus to our own program to create an atomic-powered aircraft. In other words, the fact that flying saucers existed was having an impact that was saying to our Air Force, gee, there's better ways to go. Maybe we ought to be searching for them.
Excellent point. Yeah, just showing again that there's an external influence on the development. Yes, sir?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
There's been a study done to list all the nuclear facilities in our country that have had their airspace violated.
I believe so, and I think that study was done by Donald Johnson, PhD statistician over at the Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a pretty good study, in fact, and he's a very careful guy and formulated his conclusions very carefully. One thing I know he said was there is definitely correlation between UFO sightings and nuclear facilities. He definitely did say that in a very carefully worded conclusion. And I think that study came out maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Was there a time period when it started and when it stopped, or is it still ongoing?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if it's ongoing, but it's hard to get some of these reports these days. I mean, certainly, as I'll mention in a moment, you get them right from the 1940s. You get them not just in the United States, by the way, and they go through the 80s, and I'm going to guess probably beyond. Yes?
One important question to ask is there a consciousness link? Contactees, people who have sightings, over and over again describe the awareness that the UFO is interacting with them through consciousness or telepathy.
That one does hear this a lot. I think we've all heard this a lot. A consciousness link between the object itself and the observer.
No. What I'd like to add is that in the teams of contact workers that I've worked with, United States, Peru, in Europe, they have given telepathic messages: move to the left, move to the right, move up, move down. And on many occasions, people report observing responses to both spoken and telepathic communications from humans in the course of their interactions. And one rule of thumb is to ask, is it theirs or ours? Presumably, U.S. has not developed consciousness technology to the point where they can imitate this interactive component. And I would say I'd be very surprised if U.S. assets would be interested in doing tricks for people who are observing them, whereas the so-called aliens presumably are.
Excellent points, and I agree actually completely with everything you say. The only problem that a hardcore skeptic would have is how to determine the reliability of claimed telepathic links. But I think that it happens, and there are many, I think, pretty good cases where this has happened, and some of them are in CIA records. This is a memo that I consider extremely important in terms of dealing with UFOs in a public policy context. And I mean, by 1952, again, there was another massive wave of events in the United States, military and civilian. After the Air Force did their great press conference sort of debunking this, saying, well, weather phenomena caused those sightings of the over the Capitol, that didn't mean that the classified world just stopped on this. And one of the, in the flurry of activity, this is all at the end of the Truman administration, I personally believe what happened is that the people who were managing this problem saw that there was going to be an administration change. And I think what they wanted to do is do a last bit of house cleaning. And that resulted in what became known as the Robertson Panel. But in the lead up to that, you have this memo. This is by H. Marshall Chadwell, the Director of Scientific Intelligence at CIA, writing to CIA Director Walter Beadle Smith. This is just amazing. He says, at this time, the reports of incidents convince us that there is something going on which must have immediate attention. Sightings of unexplained objects at great altitudes, traveling at high speeds, in the vicinity of major U.S. defense installations are of such nature that they are not attributable to natural phenomena or known types of aerial vehicles. So again, if you want to say, well, this is all deep black technology, is Chadwell just pulling the chain of his, is he that much out of the loop that he doesn't know and that the CIA director really doesn't know in 1952? I don't find that credible.
Do you know when that was declassified?
I'm going to guess in the late 70s. Anyone know when this was?
December 78.
All right. I knew that you would know. Yes, indeed. You're doing it. And then you have provocative... Oh, you had a question, ma'am.
Yeah, I just was going to make a comment that you used to get into what's called the HIREX, which were the human radiation experiments, which also covered a great deal of stuff in ufology, and you can't get in there anymore. It's a matter of homeland security. They're cut off now.
Oh, it's a police state, isn't it? Oh, wait, no, land of the free. Sorry, I forgot about that.
Freedom on the march.
Could you repeat some of the comments?
I'm so sorry. This person talked about human radiation experiments, which were formerly available through Freedom of Information Act requests, which are not any longer. And I think you were saying there was a UFO link?
There were, in some instances, they studied some of the military men that had contact with an unknown object that were suffering from, like, burns.
Are you saying they were experimented upon?
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't know that. And I don't want to belabor this case. This is another fascinating case. Through the 60s, there are yet more of these very provocative events. And the question must be asked, again, if it's something that we did, why is it shutting down missiles in Montana, which is what happened here? I beg your pardon? Yes, these are ICBMs out of Malmstrom Air Force Base. And this event was described in great detail. First of all, there's a lot of documentation on this, a great deal. And Robert Salas, who is man on the spot, has been very forthcoming, wrote a book, and he talks about it a lot. Yes, sir?
One quick question about this one. When it says missiles went offline, did that mean that they were just momentarily inaccessible, or were they irretrievably offline?
They were offline for a day.
For a day.
Which is a big deal. Because when Boeing did the analysis, Boeing could not find out why these missiles went to shut down. And, you know, you might not think, oh, a day, who cares? But for the military, that's a very big deal. And it should never have happened. Yes?
Are you familiar with the work of David Hamill in Canada?
I'm not.
He builds, it's basically a mechanical oscillator using magnets, and it generates a plasma. When he fires up his engine, all the neighbors' lights go out, the radios don't work for almost a half a mile, I understand. And it's actually a spacecraft engine. It's pretty well documented if you're not familiar with that.
Well, I'm coming up to that theme in a little bit.
What was the
I don't mean to deny this, but as my dear old dad likes to tell me, money talks and bullshit walks. So, I mean, I mean to be crass here, but let's see some documentation. I mean, you need something to go on here, and talk is cheap.
He's happy to talk to anybody who's willing to go visit him. And he's got the project.
Yeah, maybe I was a bit hasty there. But the thing is, it's very easy to make a claim. And the problem that I have, if you're going to write a history, or if you're going to treat this carefully, it requires follow-up, journalistic follow-up. So if the follow-up is possible, then someone should be doing it, and then we can all look at it. I mean, I'm not denying that this is the case. I spoke to a man a week and a half ago. He's 74 years old. He's a technical illustrator. He worked at Wright-Patterson, and says to me, I know for a fact, and this man is a very believable man, that the Germans were flying these basically saucers at multiple thousands of miles per hour. But he can't prove it, and I don't see. Yes?
Is this the only isolated case of nuclear missiles being violated, or is this the tip of the iceberg?
No, there's depending on how you look at it, 1970s, there were a number of intrusions along the U.S. northern border by objects that were helicopter-like, whatever they were, that again invaded the airspace of a number of Strategic Air Command sites and caused high alarms. I mean, over at Loring Air Force Base in Maine, the base, this is like out of a movie. Sirens blasting, lights shining, guys driving to the scene to find out because this object was hovering directly over the weapons storage facility there, in a highly provocative act, 2 nights in a row. And no one tried to shoot it down. I think they were afraid of it. There were some men at Loring who they weren't supposed to get close to it. They did. And they said, well, it was a big football field-shaped thing which glowed. And it had all these different, it was like the southwestern desert in motion. You have invasions of airspace at Wurtsmith Air Force Base in Michigan. I mean, just a spectacular case. And that's where you get this quote from. Aircraft was vectored into, intercepted. It was a tanker. But they're chasing this thing, and it's playing cat and mouse with them down the lake. And then they said, well, we're running low on fuel, so let's turn around. And the object started following them. And one of the men on the aircraft said, I know this might sound crazy, but it sped away from us doing about 1,000 knots, which is amazing. This presumably is the object that was hovering a short while ago over the base. And then you get just incredible events over at Malmstrom Air Force Base, again in Montana, on successive nights in November of 1975, where F-4s were sent to intercept the object, and everyone on the ground is watching the lights go out as the aircraft come in to get it. And then after the aircraft left, the lights reappear.
It's almost as if they were testing our defenses.
Maybe they're testing the defenses. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. The 1980s, I think, now things get complicated. I mean, I have a hard time knowing what do I think about the triangle sightings of the 1980s in the Hudson Valley of New York State, which is very close to where I live. The only amazing thing about that, I live fairly close to this, and I can tell you, like, no one in New York State knows about this. No one. Maybe one person in 200 might say, oh, yeah. And what happened over a period of several years, you have utterly awesome sightings of frequently enormous triangular craft. And again, this is right out of a movie, hovering low over the Taconic Parkway in New York, shining intense beams of light down on the road, freaking people out. The FAA was on the spot trying to tell the public, well, we think it's people flying microlight aircraft in formation illegally, impossibly at night. How they carry the generators to shine the lights down the road. Of course, think about it. Like, let's say you're the FAA guy, though. I mean, how on earth are you going to be the one to tell the world, well, apparently there's this humongous triangle hovering over here, invading the airspace of the Indian Point nuclear facility on I think 2 occasions. One occasion, which was, this is where this drawing's from, by one of the guards, it actually came over the facility, hovered right over the one reactor that was operational at that time, a couple of 100 feet over it, and just stayed there. And the plant, the person in charge of the plant, got the guards. He said, all right, aim your guns at this thing. They were ready to shoot at it. And a lot of good that would have done. And he was about to call the National Guard to bring a helicopter over, and I don't know what good that would have done. And then the object just glided away and left. This is video frame taken from the same day as this. It doesn't necessarily look like a triangle, but whatever it was, this was analyzed, I know, by the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. Yes, sir?
When it was hovering over the top of the building, it was large, so large that when one of the guys turning the surveillance camera tried to go from the left edge to the right edge, he had to turn almost 180 degrees.
It was enormous, and it also, if I remember correctly, disabled some of the electronics and communications systems at the plant when it was there. This was analyzed, this video footage was analyzed at the Jet Propulsion Lab and was identified as a craft, but it was not identified as anything that could be identifiable or known. Then you get these triangles. These now become complicated. I don't know who owns these things. Sometimes I think it's us, sometimes I think it's them. I think most people would say us in some way, but the problem is this. The Belgian triangles that were seen a number of times throughout 1989 and 1990, and again with the amazing capabilities, extreme acceleration from 30 miles per hour to possibly close to 2,000 miles per hour pretty much instantly, and also vertically. So at one point, Belgian Air Force radar tracked this thing descending about approximately 5,000 feet in a second. It's about a mile, just dropping in altitude. Low hovering, silent or nearly silent, and so on. Certainly the Belgian Air Force looked into this and did not have an explanation. They asked the U.S. Air Force, which gave a very cagey response. Well, the U.S. Air Force has no stealth aircraft that could have been involved in this. Well, maybe this wasn't stealth. I don't know what this was. But the Belgian Air Force ruled out any kind of ordinary aircraft. And then just recently here in the D.C. area, I think this is a very interesting case. You have 2 F-16s chasing a bluish object across the sky, about a half-hour drive outside D.C. Now, I was able to speak to this particular eyewitness, Rennie Rogers. And Rennie was at home. He had worked a night shift, and he's watching TV at about 1:30 in the morning, and he hears a rumbling over his house. He goes outside and sees jets going across the sky. Doesn't see anything else until, he said, and this was not in the Washington Post article, he said, I saw a bluish object descend at about an 80-degree angle from the sky and then stop. And then the jets turned around and just chased after this thing, but they couldn't touch it. It just took off. They had no chance. Now, this is significant. We're talking post 9/11, all right? Airspace violation right by the Capitol. You've got F-16s that cannot touch this thing. This was the single major media article on the topic before it died in the black hole of the American media, never to be seen again. It's significant. If it's black world technology, again, we are in a situation where there is a very confrontational, almost rogue situation about this. And I do not rule this out, but that's what we're basically be looking at. So again, for this section of the talk, I just want to point out that the U.S. military is still trying to chase these things down. And that there's something of a confrontational attitude about it. But there's a case for these being ours. And I think, indeed, that some of these things are very likely ours, that is human creations. First of all, you have the situation of gravity research in the 1950s, which it was certainly based in some measure on what the Germans were doing during World War II. Richard sort of discussed this, and I don't feel a need to repeat that. There is a strong, almost definite likelihood, I think, of retrievals of various objects that were crashed or came down in some way. We'll talk about that in a minute. You've got witnesses, all the video hounds over by places like Area 51 and Northrop radar cross-section field that in the late 80s and early 90s in particular were obviously seeing things that looked like experiments in field propulsion technology, that is gravity control. And you got leaks to this day. It's hard for me to see if someone raises their hand, so maybe you might want. There's a question in the front and then one in the back. Sir?
Yes. I was thinking that all this has been covered up by the Air Force and government, because I really believe Afghanistan. But why on earth would you take an experimental aircraft out to an area that's populous? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Why experiment over populated areas? I don't know. I really don't know. Psychological test, a la, what was discussed in the Battelle report of 1953. Jacques Vallée found that. I don't know. It doesn't make sense from a security point of view. I have to agree with you. Sir?
Have you spoken with Nick Cook since his book came out?
I've never met Nick Cook. I would love to meet him. I read his book, The Hunt for Zero Point, with great interest. And in fact, let me talk about that. Nick Cook was the senior aviation editor at Jane's Defense Weekly. It's about as mainstream as you get. And as he mentioned in the book, he started looking into what became known as the legend in the field, and that is the legend of German flying saucers and German anti-gravity technology. And, he said, look, in our field, we just wrote this off as legend and nonsense. But he started looking into it and came up with a lot more than just some smoke. I think he came up with some fire. Discussed at great length basically the genius, I think, Victor Schauberger, scientist who more or less on his own did a tremendous amount of work in this field, in anti-gravity research. And Hans Kammler, a fascinating lost figure of history, who basically ran what the SS version of deep black ops at the time. And Hans Kammler controlled had ultimate control, it seems, of the absolutely most secret German technology programs, which were taken over by SS during the war. Kammler disappeared just days before the German surrender in April of '45, strongly suspected that he ended up in America or working for America. I would believe that he did. I think that's the most likely. Yes, sir?
Nick Cook in his book mentions that Germans were the first people to develop a deep black program, and that
Right.
prior to Operation Paperclip and the German scientists coming over, the Americans couldn't keep a secret. For instance, the Manhattan Project. Everything got out. And it's only since possibly Kammler has come over to the United States. There's no proof of that.
Right.
But there's a suggestion by Nick Cook that the deep black type of cover for secret projects originated with the Germans.
Well, this is an excellent point, and it reminds me again of what Richard Sauter said this morning, which I agree completely with, which is that you bring the Nazi scientists over, well, you bring in the Nazis over, and you're swallowing a very, very dangerous pill. And we here in this country have incorporated that exact mode. And let's keep in mind, as I think we need to, we go into this conceit that we're somehow this free society. A free society, of course, requires openness of information, not secrecy of information. You, as a citizen, cannot make an informed decision about your society if you do not have access to information, if you are not, as Jefferson said, an enlightened citizen. And so the entire concept of deep black technology is utterly anathema to what America should be about. Now, the other thing that Nick Cook points out, now the thing that I took out of Nick Cook's book, and again, if you disagree, please do so, is that I don't see how he found any major evidence of a possibly operational craft prior to the mid-1950s. In other words, stuff that was taken over by America and then maybe by then. And even then, I think he felt, the impression I got, he felt that was a stretch. And I think that he was only comfortable saying that we might have achieved anti-grav by the early 60s. Someone interprets this differently, please let me know. Now, it's always possible that there was something super secret that actually was a success. But the thing is, I realize we're not on a level playing field here trying to get the information, but we got to get something. What is that noise? Yeah. Question. Sorry, yes. Or a comment.
Okay, do you think that we're being dumbed down by our own government?
Do I think we're being dumbed down? I do believe we are. I used to not think I was that cynical, but, you know, Springsteen said 57 channels and nothing on. I tell people, you cannot, I used to joke, but I'm dead serious now. It is absolutely impossible. You must never watch television news, ever. And the reason is that, like, unless you go in as a counterintelligence agent, steeled with the idea that, you know, what are they trying to make me believe? You can't do it. And I'm not just talking about your local Fox affiliate. I mean CNN, all due respect, Cheryl, for whom I have a lot of respect, okay? MSNBC, whatever. And then there's your internet, your AOL or MSN connection, same thing. And the only bastion of freedom, I think, is you've got to hunt on the internet. You have to use your judgment, just like, you know, all grown-ups do. But that's where it is. It's not in the corporations. Sarah, you have a question?
Well, I was sympathetic to your comment that the whole concept of black technology is anathema to a free society. But I suddenly wonder, if what we're talking about is black technology, could we possibly be fooling ourselves that this stuff really exists? I mean, is it so? We've convinced ourselves that it's black, that it's behind the curtain, and it's there. Could it equally be black and not be there?
All right, I'm a little lost there. Your logic has, maybe it's my lack of sleep. I don't know. If it's
You're convinced that this black technology exists, and that is a threat to our democracy. Now, how do you know that technology exists?
well, allow me to continue. Allow me to continue. Crash retrievals. Oh, yeah, this is a T-shirt that I bought at a conference. I just love this. This guy is hysterical. When aliens drink too much. So I says, hey, Eddie, check the gravitational influxes. He says, yeah, and we're doing like Mach 8 here, right? I asked, what about the distortion entry boots? You know what he says? Who's driving this thing? So I spent 50 years in the Nevada stinking desert having baby food pumped up my you-know-where, right? Wrong answer, Ed. Screw that inbred moron, stupid idiot, transverse theorist of parastellar physics. Sure. And the mother sold this. The artist, I didn't meet him, but his mom was hawking these T-shirts. And she said, yeah, he had to clean it up a little bit. Did I sneak that in? There are no shortage of what I believe are credible stories of crash retrievals, and let me discuss some of these. Leonard Stringfield, many of you know who this man was. I've never had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Stringfield, and by all accounts, he was a great gentleman. Fought in World War II, as I think I alluded to earlier, UFO researcher, and really, I think, is probably best known for his collection of accounts during the late 70s of first and second-hand accounts of retrievals by military personnel of crashed UFOs, and also accounts of alien bodies being held, for example, at the Blue Room and Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and so on. And the thing about Stringfield was that he collected, if I'm not mistaken, something like 30 or so first-hand accounts and about as many second-hand accounts. And by second-hand, we're talking either the person was deceased or they were alive but did not want to speak with him directly and so went through an intermediary. He had a hard time convincing some people that these were legitimate because he wouldn't give out the names of who these people were, but they came to him in confidence and in fear, many of them. There's a great deal of detail that we could discuss here, but I'm going to have to just bypass it. There's the event I'd like to know what some of the especially experienced researchers think about this case, the Fort Dix McGuire Air Force Base incident of 1978. This has been investigated by some very reputable researchers, among them Richard Hall, Len Stringfield, I believe, did, and Major George Filer, who worked at the base at the time, has done a lot of work on this. And what appears to have happened is there was a UFO sighting at the base. They were next to each other. And that a military policeman, a blue beret, shot a humanoid being on the runway. And also, apparently, there was a retrieval of technology. The body was loaded from a special plane sent from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I have not seen any real debunking of this. Is this legitimate, Dr. McAbee? Do you know?
I spoke to the guy during the investigation, which was 15 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking with us, and he was on our way to Japan, where he was going to live, get out of the country, go somewhere else.
He was scared. He was scared.
I think he's come back again since, but in any case, he seemed to be reasonably straightforward, and it certainly is a tough case to swallow. I mean, to bottom.
Right.
Except that this whole thing is true, but there's a lot of threads that suggest it really happened.
Yes.
What is that document you've got up?
Oh, this is it's a horrible resolution, isn't it? I think it's an incident report that describes, I can read it better here. It was reported to this office there were reports of UFO sightings over the base and an incident in progress on the Fort Dix installation. Control tower blanked out, recovered, something here. Upon further investigation, it was reported that an unidentified being had been shot by Dix MPs and some entered the base at above location. Oh, some entered base. Others, I don't know. Was there others? I thought there was just one being.
My recollection is that something was shot and something ran away.
One ran away. So, yeah, I think this is a real document. I believe it's legitimate.
Why did he shoot it?
That I don't know. Does anyone know?
Orders to shoot anything that was, you tell in the dark what it was.
Standard operating procedure.
Yeah, if you go out to Andrews, they have a red line painted out there. They don't let people out there much anymore, but for the air shows, they call it deadline. And when they had the air shows and stuff, they'd have a shooter on the roof. There was, unfortunately, years ago, I think, mentally handicapped young boy crossed that line. Was killed. So
Yeah.
go across that line with that.
I spoke to a former military man who told me, very matter-of-factly, he shot a protester dead who had climbed on top of an M1 Abrams tank. I mean, the guy wasn't really, he was just, really wasn't doing anything dangerous. He was trying to fight the power, and the guy shot him dead. And said he got in trouble because he gave a warning shot first. I'm not kidding. So now, this is a photograph from Holloman Air Force Base in 1957. I don't know what this is. It's a very well-known UFO photograph. I'm not saying that that's an example of operational field propulsion or anti-gravity, but it's something. And it's at the Air Force Base. I should have stretched that out a little bit more, I think. Oh, this is all scrunched in, isn't it, on the screen? I think, as I'm going to suggest now in the next few minutes, that I think there's a very strong likelihood that we have operational field propulsion somewhere in our society. And yes, I do think it's a problem for democratic rule, as I will point out. It's dealing with extreme levels of secrecy, so deep that I think all of us would be astonished about it. I don't know what this case truly signifies, the Cash Landrum case of 1980, but it's a heck of a case, and I think it's very likely that what happened to these poor people was something that belonged to us. Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Colby Landrum, a young boy, were driving in Texas, and a bright diamond-shaped object appeared, intensely bright. And Betty Cash unwisely got out of the car to look at it and suffered very, very severe radiation poisoning and burns. All of them had health problems, hair falling out, rashes, and the like for a long, long period of time. Now, the thing about it is that this object was accompanied by double rotor type helicopters, what are called Chinook style helicopters. These were not the only witnesses to the event. There were other people who were in the area who were later interviewed by John Schuessler over at MUFON and confirmed this account. So what you have here is what appears to be a likelihood of a very, very bizarre kind of technology being accompanied by what appears like a military operation, except for the fact that all inquiries into finding out who was the agency responsible were dead ends. And no one said, no, we don't have helicopters like that. There's nothing in our inventory that would match this. So there was never a satisfactory answer as to what happened to these people on that day.
I thought I heard that the U.S. government had paid her a settlement of some sort. Is that true?
I did not think that she received any settlement. Did she?
And Cassius didn't die.
Yeah, she died not long ago, in fact. So the answer was no settlement? I didn't think she got anything. Yes?
She was offered $10,000, I think, and turned it down in favor of a lawsuit, which never went.
That's right. I remember that. I've been plowing through the old MUFON journals. Yes, sir.
I think that brings up an issue that's related to the whole area of black projects. Let's say we have some of this stuff, whoever we are, we have some of this stuff, but it burns people. Among other things, there seem to be controllability and safety problems with this technology. Otherwise, for example, we're using the space shuttle, for God's sake. If we had something like this, why are we, why would
Yeah, right. There may be a very valid reason for doing it. And actually, I should back away from a moral position on this. I don't really have, and there's no need for me to have a position that this is right or wrong that they're doing it. Let's just see if they're doing it. There could be very good reasons for withholding the technology, or maybe there aren't good reasons, but the fact that they're doing it, I think, is the important thing. The event at Norton Air Force Base in California in 1988, I think, is significant. You have a number of people who said that during like an air show demonstration, special area out in the back, people who said that they saw a saucer-shaped object, several, hovering silently, of different sizes. Then you have Bob Lazar. I'm not going to make a judgment on Bob Lazar at this time. I don't know. I've gone all over the map with this man and what I think. But I think it has to be mentioned that Bob Lazar is not the first nor the last person to talk about reverse engineered technology at Area 51. All right? He is a drop in the bucket. Yes, the most famous of them probably, but he is one. And this, of course, is a photograph taken by Gary Schultz out in Nevada. After Schultz heard about Lazar on the radio talking about the objects coming out, he said, oh, wow, let's go. Expecting to see, apparently, half the state out in lounge chairs, and he said there was no one there. He was with his wife. He waited, and this object came up. He took a picture of it with a fairly cheap camera, I think. It came out very well. I include these only because these are alleged earlier photographs of UFOs that look somewhat remarkably like this object here. This is Gary Schultz. He was out there. He's one of a number of people. He's certainly not the only person who would go out to Nevada. Oh my gosh! That is Bill Hamilton. I'm wrong. In fact, I've met Bill Hamilton, and don't tell him I did that. Okay. Sorry, Bill. That's right. Well, just don't look at that. Another event, though, in December of 1990. He's with a bunch of people. This is one event of a number. They see what they describe as a huge glowing saucer, pulsating, followed by a military helicopter. Then over at out in Southern California, more aviation watchers. Over at the Northrop facility, for example, a number of cases of glowing, silent, pulsating, saucer-shaped objects were seen. Triangles were seen, boomerangs, and so on. Yes, this is the Northrop airfield. That's the one picture that I've got of it. What's that? Well, that's. I think that's it. It's probably not the whole part. A number of these cases, let me just mention briefly. You have white, glowing, pulsating, silent, disc-shaped objects, 30 feet in diameter, rising, flying towards Edwards Air Force Base. 25 more similar craft seen flying east. One approaches the group before going onward. Another group, this one's led by Bill Hamilton, it's probably why I had his picture there, near the Northrop facility, sees what he calls jumpers. White lights emerging from the ridge, moving, jumping, dancing, doing weird things, and then boomerang objects being seen. A large triangular craft. Photographs taken, unfortunately, did not turn out well. Oh, that doesn't turn up here. This, I'm not saying this is anti-gravity. This is just a neat video that was taken in Las Vegas in 1990 by a man named Roger Beard. Weird stuff going on out there. None of it's acknowledged. Then you have the Area 51 sightings. Again, these certainly continued through the 90s. This one I think is interesting. That's why I included it, from March of 1993. Object seen, a strobing aircraft performing a short roll takeoff, and then it becomes lit like a lamp, and then starts doing these very bizarre maneuvers that are not aerodynamic. And then it goes dark and lands. Now, what is this? A glowing high-speed helicopter, or an example of field propulsion? Another sighting in January of 94 by Area 51 through telescope, because you can't get too close, and an oblate spheroid, or a saucer-shaped object, making incredible accelerations, instantaneous turns, and so on.
What is the current status of Area 51?
According to whom? Popular mechanics, or?
No, according to anyone, reality.
Well, what we call Area 51, of course, is, I'm sorry?
It's still restricted airspace from surface level to infinity. So there's still something going on.
Right, and I think, it's understood that that's Area 51 is a kind of a catchphrase for the whole large region, which is larger than what is known as Area 51. So you can't go there. A lot of people have talked about the TR-3A, the Black Manta, so-called. Probably exists, or something like it exists. There's no confirmation, and if it's been around for years and years. The same with the Aurora craft, which may itself have been obsolete already. Who knows? The Aurora turned up in a budget item in the mid-1980s, 20 years ago. I doubt it's up to date. What you have with all of these people watching these amazing aircraft in the restricted areas, where are the aviation magazines here? Where's Aviation Week and Space Technology? Where's James? You get nothing. You get the UFO magazines covering this. That's where the action is. And the reason, of course, I think is it's a taboo subject, and I believe because if you start getting into this topic, it's going to lead inevitably to the topic of UFOs, and as in UFOs that are not ours. Because this is what I think is the case. I think the most logical scenario that I think of is that technology was recovered, tested, experimented on, and we developed our own stuff. And it might be difficult to explain the field propulsion technology as something that we just did, because I think it would be difficult to answer some UFO researchers. How much time do we have left?
Do you need to end, because we got to get to the next people?
Good. Well, I'm just about done here. Do I have 5 minutes or not?
No, probably like 2.
All right. There's an issue of Aviation Week that came close to breaking the territory. No mention of UFOs, though. And as far as what a source of mine who knew some people in there, an editor who was interested in this got his hands slapped, basically, and the deep black stories dried up. Famous statement by James Goodall, not by him, to him, by an insider. We have things in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas envious. Ben Rich, I'm going to have to skip by this. Ben Rich and Kelly Johnson were the successive leaders over at Lockheed Skunk Works. First Kelly Johnson, of course, legendary, succeeded by this man. And toward the end of Ben Rich's life, talked about discussions he had with Kelly Johnson. And then spoke in, oh my goodness, I deleted this thing. Ben Rich in 1993 spoke to the UCLA School of Engineering alumni group and said, he ended this long speech on Lockheed saying, we now have the technology to take ET home. He said, thank you very much, and of course was mobbed by everyone. and basically said we've got the technology. It shouldn't be held in the black anymore, and so on. Yes, sir.
Have you heard that the SR-71,
Here we go.
YF-111 interceptor was developed from captured alien technology, in other words, the wing roots, the Homestead engines?
I'm sorry, the F-22. I didn't. The SR-71. Oh, I've not heard that directly, but who knows? The whole.
Here's what I wonder. The big thing back then was Kelly Johnson's best. Received accolades for PhD aircraft. There's nothing more basic.
Right. Let me cut you off quickly because I'm almost out of time. The thing is, if I had known when I wrote my book that Kelly Johnson was into UFOs big time, which he was, it would have gone in. And I'm going to figure out a way to get into the next book because Kelly Johnson was.
Who was Ben Rich?
Ben Rich succeeded Kelly Johnson at Skunk Works. Skunk Works is the super advanced R&D part of Lockheed, the coolest part of Lockheed. Kelly Johnson ran it and was succeeded by this man. Johnson was interested in UFOs and saw them on more than one occasion, including in the capacity at Lockheed with other Lockheed personnel. You got the Disclosure Project witnesses. I'm going to have to skip past them. Everyone's talking about anti-gravity. This leaked. This was released just this week by Richard Dolan. I can't vouch for this, okay? But it's just another story. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things here. The TAW-50. This is according to what his source told him. And Richard Dolan has been the source of some very legitimate information, in my opinion, some documents that have gone through him. This is an object that is a spacecraft, but it can also cruise through the upper atmosphere and lower atmosphere at speeds of faster than Mach 50, which is unbelievable. It's supposedly nuclear powered, uses electrogravitics, that is anti-gravity type propulsion, generating its own field. Incredible weaponry. They can just wipe out cities instantly, and very large, although I didn't get a sense of the shape of this object. These leaks keep coming out, and I'm going to end on this, actually. I know this person who was this witness. I got to know this individual, who originally listed her sighting on Peter Davenport's National UFO Reporting Center. And she's a graphic artist and reconstructed what she saw. And she's not kidding about the sharp edges of this triangle. It's a perfect equilateral triangle. It doesn't look like on this image, but that's what she said it was. She reconstructed it. She went back to the road. This is in Ontario, in Canada, in January 2003, and figured it to be approximately 125 or 150 feet in diameter. Pretty large. Went over her car. She looked out, saw it was silent, and just kind of flew away. She said that it had 2 layers. She said, you can't really see here, but there's like a kind of a thin sheath underneath, and then beyond that is another black layer. Is that ours or theirs? This is what I say. We have a hostage, we have a future that is hostage to secrecy. And I say this because, look, if the black world, let's call it that, has got this, when does national security end and where does freedom begin? This is technology that some of us plebes down here in the real world would like to know about. We've got some serious issues about energy and fossil fuels. We've got a lot of things going on here that I think 60 years of secrecy is quite long enough. Thank you very much. This is nearly as long as the duration of the existence of the Soviet Union, guys. And as I'm going to mention tomorrow, that was a society that came down in 6 years once you started opening it up to glasnost and perestroika. I'm sure Gorbachev did not anticipate having his own governmental structure come down, crashing down within 6 years, but reforms spiraled out of control. And one can only wonder about the level of secrecy here on this topic, which would absolutely turn our world, our knowledge upside down. And there'd be a lot of tough questions to ask. But the fundamental issue is this. What kind of country are we living in? Are we going to live in a country, do we believe in freedom? Do you believe in people having a right to know basic facts about the nature of their world, or not? Are we going to sit on our duffs like a bunch of Stalinist peasants and say, well, we'll let the boss tell us when he's ready? And I am personally not willing to accept that, and I believe that probably most of you are not willing to accept that either. So tomorrow, if you're here, I will be discussing why UFO secrecy has severely damaged and perhaps destroyed, truly destroyed, or helped to destroy the American Republic as we understand it. But that'll be for tomorrow. Thanks very much. Hi, Dr. Wood. I'm so sorry that I made you wait there. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because I had no dry run on this, and I really cobbled it together seemingly at the last minute.
Did a very good job.
Tomorrow's is much more micromanaged, and I think will be better.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you have an anticipated release date of your upcoming book?
I'm hoping, and I really believe it could be by the